This is going to be a short study on John's Gospel, focusing on the purpose and the author's intent in writing it. And we begin with the last two verses, which have a note of truthfulness and selectivity. So, John 21, last two verses. This is the disciple that beareth witness of these things, and wrote these things, and we know that his witness is true. And there are also many other things which Jesus did, the which, if they should be written, every one, I suppose that even the world itself would not contain the books that should be written. So, there is a note of, as I said, the truthfulness of the man who wrote this, a warning to the reader that deliberately things have been selected according to a certain purpose. Not everything has been put in. Verse 24 also implies a note of community. We know that this witness is true, that his witness is true. There is a community among which the disciple, interpreted to be Apostle John, his witness is known to be true. That's the church, isn't it? All right, then. Let's also turn to this purpose statement at the end of chapter 20. Many other signs, therefore, did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written that ye may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing ye may have life in his name. And again, we have a note of selectivity. There are signs that Jesus did not written here in John's Gospel. Verse 31 indicates the evangelistic intent of John's Gospel, to believe, and that believing ye may have life in his name. Now, recall what I said about the note of community found in the end of John's Gospel. We know that his witness is true. And here, this is a church document and an evangelistic document. And this is interesting to me. Before John's Gospel was ever written, there was a church. John, the author, saw a need for church people to know the message and to know it more deeply, and in fact to believe, and that believing ye may have life in his name. In fact, the original audience of John's Gospel, I believe, was almost entirely Christian people. I very much doubt that very many out-and-out non-believers or non-Christians in the first generation ever saw or heard of John's Gospel. I think this must affect our understanding of what is evangelism. Evangelism is often thought of in terms of it's something that happens to get people saved and get them into the church. So, for example, we have simplified evangelistic presentations, such as this tract from Moody Press, for mass distribution, with the hope that by mass distribution and presentation, people outside the church are converted and come into the church. And I do not deny that that happens. In many cases, that's exactly what happens. However, we have to understand evangelism in terms of our New Testament data. You want to know what a New Testament evangelistic tract is? It's John's Gospel as a prime example of it. All 21 chapters, presenting Jesus Christ, dealing with objections, dealing with, as we shall see in further studies of in John's Gospel, things that look like faith but really aren't the real thing. And we should understand evangelism in New Testament terms. Very often it is really, when it comes down to it, converting Christian people or calling them to deeper conversion and rededication than they have attained before, a greater following of the Lord than they have attained before. Well, till next time.